The blaring music and laughter echoed through the quiet suburban neighborhood as Karen stormed out of her house, her face contorted with rage. She had been planning a relaxing evening at home, sipping her favorite Chardonnay and catching up on the latest episode of The Real Housewives. But her peaceful plans had been shattered by the raucous celebration next door. This is unacceptable, she fumed, marching across her well-manicured lawn towards the source of the disturbance. As she approached the neighboring property, she could see a large group of people gathered, signing animatedly and clapping with glee. Don't they know it's a weeknight? Karen muttered under her breath, her annoyance growing by the second. She strode up to the front door and pounded on it relentlessly, her knuckles turning white. The door swung open, revealing a kind-looking woman with a warm smile. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. "Yes, you can," Karen snapped. "I live next door, and your little party is keeping me from enjoying a peaceful evening in my own home. I demand that you turn down that dreadful music immediately." The woman's brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm sorry, but I don't think you understand. This is a deaf community event, and the music is an essential part of our celebration. We're simply enjoying ourselves and—" "I don't care what it is," Karen interrupted, her voice rising in pitch. "It's disturbing the peace, and I won't stand for it. Now turn it down, or I'll call the police." The woman's expression shifted from one of confusion to one of concern. "I don't think that will be necessary," she said calmly. "We're not breaking any laws, and this event is important to our community. Perhaps we could find a way to compromise, so everyone can be happy." Karen scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Compromise? I don't think so. This is my neighborhood, and I won't have my tranquility disrupted by a bunch of deviants." She spat the last word, her lips curling into a sneer. The woman's face fell, and she shook her head sadly. "I'm sorry, but I can't accommodate your request. This event is crucial for our community, and we have every right to celebrate. If you have a problem with that, then I suggest you take it up with the authorities." With that, she turned and closed the door, leaving a fuming Karen standing on the doorstep. Karen's face flushed with anger, and she stormed back to her house, muttering under her breath. She quickly dialed the non-emergency police number, her fingers trembling with rage. "Hello, I'd like to report a noise complaint," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "There's a disturbance next door, and it's keeping me from enjoying my own home. I demand that you send someone out here immediately to put a stop to this nonsense." As she hung up the phone, Karen felt a sense of satisfaction, convinced that she was in the right and that the authorities would soon put an end to the deaf community's celebration. Little did she know, her actions were about to set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. 20 minutes later, the sound of sirens pierced the night air, and Karen practically leaped out of her chair, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. She hurried to the window, peering out eagerly as the police cruiser pulled up in front of the neighboring property. 2 officers stepped out of the vehicle, their expressions neutral as they approached the front door. Karen watched with bated breath as the kind-looking woman from earlier opened the door, her face etched with concern. The officers spoke briefly with her, and Karen could see the woman gesturing emphatically, her hands moving in graceful, expressive motions. To Karen's frustration, the officers simply nodded and turned to leave, without so much as a warning or a demand to lower the music. Indignant, Karen threw open her front door and marched across the lawn, intercepting the officers before they could reach their car. "Excuse me, officers," she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I made a noise complaint, and I'd like to know why you're not doing anything about it." The officers exchanged a weary glance, and the elder of the 2 cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we've spoken with the residents, and they assured us that they are not violating any noise ordinances. This appears to be a private event, and they have every right to gather and celebrate as they see fit." Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. But the music is so loud. It's disturbing the peace, and I can't even enjoy my own home." I understand your frustration, ma'am, the officer replied, his tone measured and patient. However, the residents have a permit for this event, and they're not breaking any laws. Unless the noise level becomes truly excessive, there's nothing we can do. Karen's jaw dropped, and for a moment, she was rendered speechless. Truly excessive, she sputtered. This is outrageous. I pay my taxes, and I deserve to have a peaceful evening in my own home. The officers exchanged another look, clearly growing weary of Karen's tirade. I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's nothing more we can do. If the noise continues to bother you, you're welcome to file a formal complaint with the city. But for now, we're satisfied that the residents are within their rights. With that, the officers turned and headed back to their car, leaving a fuming Karen standing on the sidewalk. She watched, her hands balled into fists, as the police cruiser pulled away, its sirens fading into the distance. Seething with rage, Karen stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. She paced the living room, her mind racing as she tried to come up with a new plan of attack. There was no way she was going to let those deviants ruin her evening, not if she had anything to say about it. Determined to put an end to the deaf community's celebration, Karen began plotting her next move, her eyes glinting with a dangerous resolve. She wasn't about to let a little thing like the law stand in her way. As the evening wore on, the music and laughter continued to spill over into Karen's property, driving her to the brink of madness. She paced her living room, her mind racing with increasingly desperate plans to put an end to the deaf community's celebration. Determined not to let the police thwart her efforts, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She gathered a stack of handwritten notes, each one dripping with passive-aggressive undertones, and set out to deliver them to her unsuspecting neighbors. Squaring her shoulders, Karen marched across the lawn, her eyes narrowed and her lips pursed in a tight, unforgiving line. She approached the front door, her fingers trembling as she rapped on the wood with more force than necessary. The door swung open, revealing the same kind-looking woman from earlier. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Yes, you can," Karen replied, her tone clipped and frosty. "I've written a series of notes for you and your friends to read. I suggest you take them to heart, or there will be consequences." Without waiting for a response, Karen thrust the stack of papers into the woman's hands and turned on her heel, stalking back to her own home. The woman stared at the notes, her brow furrowed in confusion. Cautiously, she closed the door and returned to the gathering, her expression grave. "What was that all about?" One of the deaf community members signed, his eyes filled with concern. The woman sighed and began to sign the contents of the notes, her movements slow and deliberate. As the others read the messages, their faces darkened with a mixture of confusion, frustration, and alarm. The notes were a litany of demands and threats, all centered around the idea that the deaf community's celebration was an unwelcome intrusion in Karen's neighborhood. She demanded that they lower the music, limit the number of guests, and conclude the event by a specific time, or she would take further action. "This is unacceptable." One of the deaf community members signed angrily. "We have every right to be here, and we won't be bullied by this woman." The others nodded in agreement, their hands moving with a newfound sense of determination. They gathered in a tight circle, discussing their options and formulating a plan to address the situation. Meanwhile, Karen watched from her living room window, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She was confident that her stern warnings would be enough to intimidate the deaf community and force them to comply with her demands. Little did she know, however, that her actions were about to set off a chain of events that would challenge her beliefs and forever alter the course of her life. The following day, Karen was surprised to find a small group of people gathered on her front lawn, their faces set in determined expressions. As she stepped outside to investigate, she recognized the kind-looking woman from the deaf community event, along with several other members of the group. "What is the meaning of this?" Karen demanded, her voice laced with indignation. The woman stepped forward, her hands moving in graceful, expressive motions as she addressed Karen. "We're here to have a respectful dialogue with you," she signed, her movements slow and deliberate. "We want to understand your concerns and find a way to address them that works for everyone." Karen's brow furrowed in confusion, and she eyed the group with suspicion. "I've already made my concerns clear," she snapped. "I won't tolerate the noise and disruption your celebration is causing. If you don't take steps to lower the volume and limit the number of guests, I'll have no choice but to take further action." The woman shook her head, her expression calm but resolute. "We understand your frustration, but we're not willing to compromise the integrity of our event. This celebration is a crucial part of our community's identity, and we have a right to gather and express ourselves freely." Karen scoffed, her lips curling into a sneer. "Your community is disrupting the peace in my neighborhood. I pay my taxes, and I deserve to have a quiet evening in my own home. If you can't respect that, then I'll have no choice but to take this to the authorities." The woman's eyes narrowed, and she raised her hands to respond, but before she could, another member of the group stepped forward. This time, it was a young man, his face etched with a mixture of frustration and determination. "You know, this isn't just about the noise," he signed, his movements sharp and emphatic. "It's about your blatant disrespect and discrimination towards our community. You've made it clear that you see us as deviants and troublemakers, and that's simply unacceptable." Karen's eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to retort, but the young man continued, his hands moving with an intensity that belied his calm exterior. "We're not going to be silenced or intimidated by your threats," he signed. "This is our neighborhood too, and we have a right to celebrate our identity and culture. If you have a problem with that, then it's your problem, not ours." The group murmured in agreement, their faces set with a determination that seemed to unsettle Karen. She shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting from one face to the next, as if she were suddenly unsure of her footing. I won't stand for this," she stammered, her voice faltering slightly. "I'm going to call the police, and they'll put a stop to this nonsense once and for all." Before she could make good on her threat, the woman raised her hand, her expression calm but unwavering. "We've already spoken to the authorities, Karen," she signed. "They've assured us that we're not breaking any laws, and they have no intention of intervening. So perhaps it's time for you to reconsider your stance and try to find a way to coexist peacefully with our community." Karen's face flushed with a mixture of anger and frustration, and for a moment she seemed at a loss for words. But as she looked into the unwavering gazes of the deaf community members, a seed of doubt began to take root in her mind, and she couldn't help but wonder if she had been too quick to judge and too eager to assert her perceived authority. In the days that followed, Karen found it increasingly difficult to maintain her steadfast opposition to the deaf community's celebration. Despite her best efforts to ignore the music and laughter that drifted over from the neighboring property, she found herself drawn to the infectious energy and sense of camaraderie that permeated the event. As she watched from the safety of her living room window, Karen couldn't help but notice the genuine joy and connection that the deaf community members shared. They signed and laughed with such enthusiasm, their faces alight with a happiness that Karen hadn't seen in her own life for quite some time. Slowly, the seeds of doubt that had been planted during the confrontation on her lawn began to take root, and Karen found herself questioning the validity of her own actions. Had she been too quick to judge and condemn a community that she had never truly taken the time to understand? One evening, as the sound of music and laughter rose to a crescendo next door, Karen found herself drawn outside, her feet carrying her across the lawn before she even realized what she was doing. Hesitantly, she approached the front door, her fingers poised to knock, but before she could make contact, the door swung open, revealing the kind-looking woman from the deaf community. "Karen," the woman signed, her expression a mixture of surprise and cautious optimism. "What brings you here?" Karen faltered, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find the right words. I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I guess I just wanted to understand. The woman's face softened, and she gestured for Karen to come inside. Please come in. We'd be happy to have you join us. Hesitantly, Karen stepped over the threshold, her eyes widening as she took in the scene before her. The deaf community members were gathered in a large open space, their hands moving with practiced ease as they communicated with one another. The walls were adorned with vibrant artwork and colorful banners, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and music. As Karen slowly made her way into the room, the conversation gradually came to a halt, and all eyes turned towards her. For a moment, she felt a surge of panic, certain that she was about to be met with hostility and rejection. But to her surprise, the deaf community members greeted her with warm smiles and open arms, welcoming her into their midst. One by one, they began to sign and gesture, introducing themselves and inviting Karen to join in the festivities. Karen felt a strange sense of discomfort, but also a growing curiosity and a desire to understand this community that she had so readily dismissed. As the evening wore on, Karen found herself slowly letting down her guard, engaging in tentative conversations, and even attempting to learn a few basic signs. The deaf community members were patient and encouraging, and Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at the way they communicated with such fluidity and expressiveness. By the time the event drew to a close, Karen found herself feeling a strange sense of connection. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was something about the deaf community's warmth and inclusivity that had managed to chip away at the walls she had so carefully constructed around herself. As she made her way back to her own home, Karen found herself mulling over the events of the evening, her mind filled with a swirling mix of emotions. Had she been too quick to judge? Had her own preconceptions and biases blinded her to the humanity and richness of this community? These were questions that would continue to haunt her in the days and weeks to come, as she found herself irresistibly drawn back to the deaf community's celebrations, her heart and mind slowly opening to the possibility of a new and unexpected understanding. As the weeks passed, Karen found herself drawn deeper and deeper into the world of the deaf community, her initial prejudices slowly giving way to a growing sense of understanding and empathy. She began attending the community's events regularly, eagerly learning the intricacies of sign language and immersing herself in the vibrant culture. The once disruptive music and laughter that had so vexed her now filled her with a sense of warmth and belonging, as she witnessed the joy and camaraderie that permeated every gathering. One evening, as Karen sat among the deaf community members, her hands moving clumsily as she attempted to sign, she was approached by the kind-looking woman she had first encountered on her neighbor's doorstep. Karen, the woman signed, her movements fluid and graceful. "I must admit, I'm surprised to see you here. After our initial encounter, I never thought you'd be willing to step into our community." Karen felt a twinge of embarrassment, her cheeks flushing with a hint of shame. "I know," she signed back, her movements hesitant and unsure. I was so quick to judge, so quick to dismiss all of you. But being here, seeing the way you all come together, the way you support and uplift one another, it's opened my eyes in a way I never could have imagined." The woman nodded, her expression warm and understanding. "We're all on a journey of learning and growth, Karen. What matters is that you've taken the time to listen, to try to understand. That's the first step towards building bridges and creating a more inclusive world." Karen's lips curved into a tentative smile, and she found herself nodding in agreement. "I've learned so much, not just about your community, but about myself. The way you communicate, the way you celebrate your identity, it's truly inspiring." The woman reached out and placed a gentle hand on Karen's arm, her touch conveying a sense of acceptance and understanding that Karen had never experienced before. "You know," the woman signed, her eyes sparkling with sincerity, "we're having a special event next weekend, a celebration of deaf heritage and culture. I'd be honored if you would join us." Karen's heart swelled with a mix of emotions, and she found herself eagerly nodding in response. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she signed back, her movements steadier and more confident than ever before. As the days passed, Karen's excitement grew, and she found herself immersing herself in the history and traditions of the deaf community, eager to learn and participate in the upcoming celebration. Gone were the days of passive-aggressive notes and frustrated phone calls to the police. In their place was a genuine desire to connect, to understand, and to be a part of something greater than herself. And as Karen stood among the deaf community members on the day of the celebration, her heart filled with a sense of belonging and purpose that she had never experienced before. She knew that her life had been forever changed by this remarkable community and their unwavering spirit. The day of the deaf community's celebration dawned bright and clear, and Karen found herself practically vibrating with excitement as she prepared to attend the event. Gone were the days of her frustrated opposition. In their place was a genuine sense of anticipation and a deep desire to immerse herself in the rich culture and traditions of her newfound community. As Karen made her way across the lawn and approached the familiar front door, she was greeted by the kind-looking woman, her face alight with a warm smile. Karen. The woman signed, her movements fluid and expressive. "I'm so glad you could make it. Come in, come in. The celebration is just about to begin." Karen stepped through the threshold, her eyes widening as she took in the scene before her. The once quiet living room had been transformed into a vibrant, bustling space, filled with the energy and excitement of the deaf community. Colorful banners and artwork adorned the walls, and the air was alive with the sound of music and laughter. Everywhere Karen looked, she saw people signing and gesturing, their faces alight with joy and camaraderie. It was a far cry from the tense confrontation that had first brought her to this very doorstep, and she found herself feeling a sense of wonder and belonging that she had never experienced before. As the celebration kicked into high gear, Karen found herself swept up in the infectious energy of the deaf community. She eagerly learned new signs, her fingers moving with growing confidence as she engaged in conversation after conversation. She marveled at the intricate choreography of the traditional deaf dances, her heart swelling with a sense of awe and appreciation. But it was the sense of community, the unwavering support and acceptance that the deaf community members extended to one another, that truly captured Karen's heart. She watched in wonder as they signed and laughed, their faces alive with a deep and abiding connection that she had never witnessed before. And as the celebration reached its crescendo, with the entire community joining together in a rousing rendition of a traditional deaf song, Karen found herself overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she joined in, her hands moving with a newfound grace and fluidity, her voice raised in a joyful chorus. In that moment, Karen knew that she had found her place, her heart forever entwined with the vibrant and resilient deaf community that had so warmly welcomed her into their fold. Gone were the days of her prejudice and judgment. In their place was a deep and abiding respect, a sense of kinship that transcended the boundaries of her own limited worldview. As the celebration drew to a close and the deaf community members bid her farewell, Karen knew that her life had been forever changed. She had been given a gift, a chance to see the world through a new lens, and she was determined to cherish and nurture the connections she had made, to be a fierce advocate and ally for a community that had so profoundly touched her heart. In the weeks and months that followed the deaf community's celebration, Karen's life underwent a profound transformation. Gone was the rigid, judgmental woman who had once stormed her neighbor's doorstep, intent on silencing the joyful sounds of their gathering. In her place was a woman reborn, one whose heart and mind had been forever opened to the richness and diversity of the world around her. Karen dove headfirst into learning American Sign Language, her fingers moving with a newfound grace and confidence as she immersed herself in the deaf community's traditions and cultural practices. She attended every event and gathering, eagerly soaking up the warmth and camaraderie that had once seemed so foreign to her. But Karen's journey of transformation went beyond simply embracing the deaf community. She began to question the assumptions and biases that had once so rigidly defined her worldview, challenging herself to see the humanity in all people, regardless of their differences. In the process, Karen found herself becoming an ardent advocate for diversity and inclusion, using her voice and her privileged position in the community to champion the rights and needs of marginalized groups. She spoke out against discrimination, organized fundraisers and educational events, and worked tirelessly to build bridges between the deaf community and the hearing world. Her neighbors, once the target of her ire, now regarded her with a newfound respect and admiration. They marveled at the transformation they had witnessed, the once intolerant Karen now a beacon of compassion and understanding. But Karen's greatest triumph came when she was invited to speak at a local conference on the importance of accessibility and inclusive design. Stepping up to the podium, her hands moving with the fluid grace of a seasoned signer, Karen shared her story, her words resonating with the audience in a way that was both deeply personal and profoundly impactful. As she stepped down from the stage, Karen was met with a thunderous standing ovation, the crowd's applause a testament to the power of her message and the profound transformation she had undergone. In that moment, she knew that her journey had come full circle, that the once closed-off woman who had filed a noise complaint on a deaf community event had been reborn as a champion of inclusivity and understanding. And as she returned home, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of profound gratitude for the deaf community that had so graciously welcomed her into their fold. Their resilience, their unwavering spirit, and their boundless capacity for love and acceptance had forever changed the trajectory of her life, and she knew that she would carry those lessons with her for the rest of her days. In the end, Karen's story was not one of victory or defeat, but rather a testament to the power of empathy, understanding, and the transformative potential of truly listening to the voices that had once been so easily dismissed. It was a tale of redemption, of growth, and of the profound impact that a single act of kindness and inclusion can have on a life forever changed.